Hello, everybody. Welcome. Now, what are we going to be talking about? This is probably my last broadcast before the election. It's going to be my kind of final prediction on the election result and then a post election analysis stroke prediction for what could be happening in the next 4 years. And we'll be sort of honing in on a lot of the key themes that people are talking about. So, I'll talk about what I think about the Reform seats. The other day I was calling them Referendum Party. Well, I don't think Reform is such a great name. To me, it always sounds like Reform School in South Africa. People had to be sent when they'd been disobedient. So, not a good name, not inspiring. But anyhow, the Reform Party, I think they're going to top on 7 seats. Probably less. Remember, UKIP got 4 million votes in 2015, didn't translate to any seats. I think the only 2 seats they ever had were like Douglas Carswell from the Tory party and another defector. So it's very difficult for small parties to translate the huge momentum into actual seats, particularly because Labour have an incredibly motivated, strong ground force available in every single constituency, and they're awesome at getting the vote out. Next, I'll talk about some of the other parties. I also want to address the fact that saying that although people are saying Starmer will get in, but he's already incredibly unpopular, and because of his unpopularity, he'll probably only last about 7 months or a few months before they get rid of him. Now, astrologically, there is a possibility in January they get rid of him for a new leader. But I'm thinking that's not going to happen. I think once he's in there, he's the Council of Foreign Relations guy. That's the person they want there. We were saying in 2020 or 2021, Biden will be dead in 3 months. But hey, we've now had 4 years of Weekend at Bernie's, and it shows no sign of ending despite his disastrous showing at the debates. They're still pushing this guy. So I think it's part of the demoralization agenda, and it's part of them just saying in your face, we'll put Mickey Mouse there and you'll believe it's the president or the prime murderer or whatever the situation is. So they can get the wheels and they can oil the tracks and keep this Starmer going and going and going if he's doing the right thing. He's just as bland as what they want. Remember, we were thinking that Sunak would be replaced. He had scandal upon scandal upon scandal. They kept him going right until he was in the position to hand an election over to Starmer. They keep these guys going if they want to keep them going. Now, the other talking point I'm hearing a lot on Twitter is the establishment are terrified of Nigel Farage. No, they're not. He's always been a Tory release valve. The Tories know they're not a proper Conservative party. They're not really on the right. And they know a huge amount of their voters will desert them if a real party to the right comes along. So Nigel Farage, he's a Tory in disguise. He's always there to scoop up the disenchanted Tory voters and make sure they all plough their emotional energy into him, their political dreams and hopes, and their frustrations into him. He represents everything they'd like to hear from the Tories. People will vote for him, and what will happen? Nothing. Did we get Brexit? No. Soon as we got the Brexit vote, oh, he was off, I'm retiring now. God, the work wasn't even begun to be done yet, right? And when he had an opportunity with the Brexit party, he said, okay, no, I'll vote for Boris kind of thing. So, no, Nigel Farage is just there to legitimize these elections. Prior to him saying he was running, no one was interested. I mean, no one likes Starmer. No one likes Sunak. No one even knows who's running for the Lib Dems. No one cares about any of these parties. There was going to be an incredibly low turnout. The election was just a non-starter. He pops up, and suddenly everyone's excited, talking about the election. It's giving the whole thing a boost because of his personality and charisma and whatnot. So he's there to legitimize it because elections are still a key part of this whole pantomime we're going through with politics. They want you to think that every 4 or 5 years you put a little cross in a box and you affect the outcome, whereas the powers that should not be are lobbying and investing billions 24/7, 365 to make sure what they want. Just reminds me that David Icke always says we're the 99, they're the 1%, but it's not really true because a very, very well-organized, cohesive, motivated 2% with a good strategy are always going to outwit a chaotic, disorganized, disillusioned 99% who partially sheep, partially watching sports ball, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's look Reform, then we're going to look at the UK chart. So, it is Reform. Probably say referendum party again just now. Sorry about that. Let's look at possible seats. Definitely winning Clacton. Ashfield up in Nottinghamshire, pretty much certainty. Barnsley South, definitely. Boston and Skegness, Richard Tice's seat, definitely. Cannock Chase, which is a very pretty kind of area to the northwest of Birmingham. That seems in the bag. Slight outlier, that one. It is northwest of Birmingham, yeah. Okay, Louth and Horncastle, Lincolnshire area seems a dead cert. And also Skipton and Ripon up in North Yorkshire. Definitely. I don't know if it's North Yorkshire. Possibilities in London, Orpington, Reform on 24%. Who knows on the day? Maybe people go for them. Hornchurch and Upminster, they're currently on 21%. A lot of people who formerly lived in the East End in West Ham have moved out to that area. They're kind of reform-ish minded people. Gosport, possibility, as is Hamble Valley, Fareham, Cambridgeshire, Northeast, Huntingdon, Sedgwick, someone said, Chester. Those are much lower possibilities. So there you go. I think the Lib Dems will perform a lot better than people expect, particularly in the home counties, in the southwest. They're very, very strong there. They could win a few seats in Scotland as well. So Lib Dems, and I don't think the SNP are down and out simply because Starmer is just not that popular. So let's have a look and see. Yes. Yeah, they want to give you the illusion of choice, which is why Nigel Farage is so important. Now, let's look at what's going to happen during the Starmer prime murdership. Now, the key thing happening in the UK chart, which you can see here, hopefully, I know I'm a bit obscuring it, is that Pluto, which is in the first degrees of Aquarius, is opposing Jupiter, which is 1 degree 51. Now, I've talked about this before. This links back to some key times in history. And one of those times is in the Crimean War, which leads me to believe that this whole war with Russia is not over, and if by winter we'll see NATO boots on the ground, that despite Trump always not as being so keen about going up against Putin, I think the UK is pretty keen to take this a lot further. We know that Boris Johnson has been going there scuppering peace deals. So definitely the Russia thing has more legs and Starmer will take it further. Another key date relating to that transit, which has a synchronicity about it, was in 1984 when Pluto in the first degrees of Scorpio was opposing Jupiter in that position. And what happened that year? Well, we had that siege of the Libyan embassy where a cop, Yvonne Fletcher, was killed. A lot of people said that was, one of these sort of highly suspect, possibly false flag things. But what does that tell you? That was all about Iran. So we'll see perhaps a false flag or other information coming to light, which will help G up the public's angst about Iran. And then they'll be thinking, oh, we'd better attack Iran because we know that's on the agenda. Forget Taiwan. That one's a red herring, not really happening. What else happened in 1984 was there was the IRA bomb attack against the Tory party at the Brighton Hotel during the conference. I think one of the Tories were killed. Margaret Thatcher escaped, obviously, and a lot of people were badly injured. But what does that tell us? We are in a key area where a false flag could take place, perhaps even against one of the big political parties. Maybe they'll do it against Reform, maybe they'll do it against Labour, whatever, but some sort of big terrorist event, so-called terrorist event, that'll help get people in the mood for war. Now, someone pointed out that Sue Gray, I think it was, I'm sure it was on my Twitter, but anyway, this woman, Sue Gray, used to be an advisor or something for Starmer, or she worked with Starmer way back. And in the height of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, she went to Northern Ireland to open a pub there and ran it for several years. Now she's kind of back, and people are saying, intelligence asset, why would you open a pub in Belfast during the Troubles unless it was a pretext for the pub was a cover for something. Yeah, so watch out for her coming back on the scene. Let's go back to the date when Jupiter was during the Crimean War. This was another time when Jupiter in Leo in the UK chart was triggered by Pluto. Something else happened important. There was in 1853, Pluto square Jupiter. They made the smallpox vaccine compulsory in the UK in that year. Very interesting. Compulsory vaccination. Could that be something that's coming down the line? Right. So we've discussed, okay. Another important thing we're going to see happening in the UK chart, which we'll link back to previous years when this happened, is you can see in the, oh, sorry, this is the solar arcs, which are also important, not the transits. But as you guys will know, Neptune is nearing the end of Pisces. It'll be going into Aries, and right from there, it will be opposing Uranus. Here in the UK chart, Uranus ruling the fifth house. That means Neptune is sacrificed, the fifth house children. Children will be sacrificed. Could that be for war, for the agendas, the beginning with T? An attack on children, brainwashing, mind washing of children, and using them to advance the agenda. So it's the use of children to advance multiple agendas. But what else happened last time that was triggered? Well, it happened in the 80s during the Falklands War, that Neptune triggered Uranus. It also happened in the Iraq War, 2003, 2004, that era. So we looking back and we're seeing war is all over this chart. We're seeing Pluto's movement, very similar to the astrology of the Crimean War. We also have similarities to the Falklands War and to the Iraq War 2003, 2004. So we can see that war is definitely going to be one of the big things on the agenda. Now, what is war for? Well, they'll tell you in the media that they are wanting to use Ukraine to weaken Russia. They think if they put on enough pressure, the Russian people will get fed up with Putin, the country will fracture, and then they'll have a balkanized Russia. And that's what the talking heads on the mainstream will kind of allude to. I think it's more about doing nothing to Russia. I think it's about the transfer of wealth from the West to the East, particularly China via Russia. Every single thing they've done has made Russia stronger. Sanctions make countries more resilient and more self-sufficient. Russia's been forced to find other means of conducting their finances. The whole thing about the sanctions have pushed them closer to China and made that unit stronger and made BRICS stronger. The entire campaign in Ukraine has weakened the West. They've plowed in tons of money, which is all being laundered back to the powers that should not be. So it's depleting resources, financial resources of the West for the purpose of money laundering to other ventures. It's depleting the military stocks, the ordnance, the armaments, everything like that of the West. And it's ruining Western economies. So it's it's not just backfiring, it's meant to backfire, because what we are meant to see is the kind of West being deconstructed and a whole new empire being reconstructed in the East, and that's why they want these wars. It's not to hurt the other countries, it's kind of to hurt us. But disappointed that Galloway's partner won't unseat Angela Rayner or any other people, because that would have been nice to see. Now, you know what I've said, Trump has Jupiter on his MC and conjunct Sun, Mercury. I mean, Jupiter is so prevalent in his chart in the week of the elections, he's a shoe-in. I think that all along these trials were to build legitimacy for him, because in the eyes of his supporters, when horrible, nasty people in the establishment media are attacking him, it makes him more popular. It keeps him grabbing headlines. It's great. So if you can see this now, they're actually using lawfare to popularize people. They've used it to popularize Trump, Assange, Tommy Robinson. Perhaps you can see it in a number of contexts, but you can actually use lawfare not to take someone down, but eventually just to make them really, really popular. Now, let's just talk about a few things that I'd want to point out to you. You can probably see here that in 4 years now, although I said Starmer will be there in the short run, maybe a blip in January, but otherwise I think he's going to be in the short run, because I actually think January's the time when there's going to be major changes to the royals, with possibly the announcement that Charles will abdicate, or his health has got much worse. I mean, it could be Kate in January, but it's probably more likely it's Charles. So they've had to get Starmer in now, because there'll be royal stuff coming down the line, like William being sworn in next year because of Charles' decline in health, stroke, whatever. Okay. So I think Starmer's going to be there 4 years, but at the end of the 4 years, we have a lot happening. So you can see solar arc Saturn, which is an important planet for the UK, because, you know, it's the rule of the sun and the IC, will be conjunct the descendant, so it's on an angle, very important. The sun, very important planet in all charts, will be conjunct Saturn in 4 years, right? And the moon, let's grab hold of the moon. Yes, the solar arc moon in 4 years will be conjunct Pluto down here. So again, we're wondering what's going to be happening in those years. Okay, so the years that are similar would be 1853, which is again the Crimean War and all that, so another nod to the whole war with Russia thing. 1834 and also 1843. So let's just have a look what happened those years to see what similar might happen. Well, what was very interesting here, let's just check this year, which one I've got here. This is it says 1835. Let's leave that one. Let's go here to the year 1834, which is similar in the UK chart to what I see coming up in these solar arcs. Something very interesting happened actually. On the 16th of November, the burning of Parliament. Much of the Palace of Westminster is destroyed by fire. Interesting. Now, it wasn't sabotage or anything, but this is a very interesting concept. Will we see it bombed, or is it figurative? So last time it was nearly destroyed by fire. This time, will it be destroyed because people totally lose faith in that as an institution? Stop voting, there's a Guy Fawkes event, overthrow of Parliament, something cataclysmic is going to happen, either physically or figuratively, involving Palace of Westminster and therefore our whole democracy and Parliament. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay. If we have a look at what, sort of in a similar vein, if we go back to the year 1843, something rather curious happened on the 20th of January. Daniel Macnaghten, I think that's how, Macnaghten, shoots and kills the Prime Minister's private secretary, Edward Drummond, in Whitehall. An assassination attempt on the Prime Minister's private secretary. Could have been on the Prime Minister, I guess. Not sure what the exact circumstances were. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity. But interesting, isn't it? Those two almost attacks. Now, of course, there's a different context, but it is very interesting anyway. Something else that was happening, I wanted to mention in this year, hold on, I've just got to find it to finish there. Okay, something else that was happening, that says the 1843 zone on 5th of December, unable to persuade his cabinet to repeal the Corn Laws in the face of the Great Famine in Ireland, Peel, that was the Prime Minister at the time, Peel, tenders his resignation as Prime Minister to the Queen, but is reinstated days later when Lord Russell is unable to form a government. So again, what's the theme when we're looking back in these years? Houses of Parliament burning down, assassination attempt on the Prime Minister's private secretary, and resignation because of a problem with famine, and the resignation not accepted. Immediately the government of the other person can't form a government. So we're seeing chaos in government, the falling apart of this whole system, and that is potentially happening in 4 years. Very interesting. Very interesting about it coinciding with the potato famine. Don't know if there's anything in that. Let's look at 1852. Now, what I was just talking about was in 4 years. Let's go back to transits that are similar now. There was the 1852 general election, which, similar to this year, and they said it was a watershed in the formation of the modern political parties of Britain. Following 1852, the Tory Conservative Party became more completely the party of the rural aristocracy, while the Whig or Liberal Party became the party of the rising urban bourgeoisie in Britain. Now, although the results of that election were fairly close, as you can tell, it set the stall for future events. So maybe this particular election is also pivotal. Maybe, like then, you saw the Tory party forming their base versus the Whig or Liberal. And now maybe we'll see the demise of the Tory party as it was once known, the rise of something called reform, and a whole new political spectrum opening up. So lots interesting and plenty to watch in 4 years' time. But as you heard, I'm not overconfident about Starmer being removed anytime soon. And so we're going to have a lot of damage done in these 4 years. But anyway, let's brace up and see what happens.